What's up, and welcome into the 24/7 Sports College Basketball Show. I'm your host, Adam Finkelstein. I'm going to be joined by everybody here today: Eric Bossi, Travis Branham, Isaac Trotter. We're going to talk about a few different things, but before we do, make sure you hit that like, subscribe button, share it with all your friends, and help keep this show trending in the right direction. Here's what we got on today's show for you. Given that it is not only Olympics week, but we have the FIBA U18 championships going on in Europe right now, there is a definite international theme to what we are watching basketball-wise. So we're going to play off that and talk about some of the best international prospects coming to college basketball next year. And I don't mean guys that played in the United States, even if they are originally from abroad. We are talking about players who we have not yet seen, so we're going to break them down with Travis and Isaac. Then we are going to go over some of the latest recruiting intel with Bossi and Travis, because I tell you what, everybody's cutting their list, but they're cutting it to like 10 or 12. That's not a list cut. That's just like saying, everybody who's recruiting me, keep recruiting me. So we're going to talk about that and talk about who some of these real contenders are amongst these giant lists. But first, as promised, let's bring in Isaac and Travis to help talk about some of the top international prospects coming to college basketball next year. Now, guys, I've got a few names to run by you. But as I said at the top of the show, we are not talking about guys who played in the States last year, who played grassroots in the States, even guys who played NBA Academy, really, because we've already talked about a lot of those guys. So these are players that we have not discussed yet. And tops among those is Egor Demir, going to BYU, billed as a 6'8" combo guard from Russia. Get a look at some of the highlights here. Already being marketed as a potential one-and-done lottery pick. Obviously, he's going to have all kinds of eyes on him next year under a brand-new head coach at BYU, but certainly has a potentially very unique combination of size and skill, mismatch playmaking ability. You see his prowess playing with the ball at his hands at his size. But, Travis, what else can you tell us about what makes this guy so special?
Yeah, this was the prize of Kevin Young's class at BYU this season. We don't have him ranked, but I mean, when you look at the history of prospects at BYU, he's arguably the top prospect that they have ever reeled in out of the high school ranks. And so, as you saw on the screen, he's a 6'9" wing/guard. He's just got that skill set that can impact the game in a variety of ways. He's comfortable creating off the dribble, can make shots out to three, but can also really pass and see the floor. So if he comes over to BYU, we have yet to see what Kevin Young's system is exactly going to be. But if he adjusts to the tempo and physicality of the game in the United States, I mean, this kid could really skyrocket and be a big-time player out in Utah.
Isaac, before I go to you, I want to speak to two things Travis just said there, because I think, number one, all these guys are going to get rated and ranked in the coming days, so you can check that out at 247sports.com. But additionally, I think the key is exactly what you said, adapting to the speed and physicality of the American game, particularly in college basketball, because college basketball is officiated very differently than the NBA is, and physicality is just, there's a lot of physicality allowed, quite frankly. So I think that's going to be a key for all these guys. Isaac, what do we know about, or what do we think? Because as Trav said, Young is a first-year head coach. We don't know the specifics of what that system are going to look like. But what's our best guess about how Demir might fit into that BYU lineup?
Well, let's be honest. He's being paid like he's the alpha of this team, right? BYU has basically flexed their muscles in the NIL game to be able to attract a talent like this to come from overseas and come play basketball in the Big 12. And you kind of look at the ecosystem of what this roster is. Like, they have a nice build of Dallin Hall at point guard and Fouche Traore at big man. And now you kind of can just play with what Egor wants to be. Like, he has an opportunity to be the top go-to wing on this roster. And I'm curious to see how much positional size they could really get on the floor with Cannon Catchings and Egor Demir, and then Moat Mag, who's a phenomenal wing defender out of Rutgers. You put those three guys on the floor, that's 6'9", 6'8" around Fouche Traore and Dallin Hall. So I'm excited for what he can do. That 3-to-1 assist to turnover ratio is really intriguing too. But we'll see. But at the end of the day, they're paying him to be, a top option. I think he's probably going to be best suited as the number 2 offensive weapon for this group, but we'll kind of have to wait and find out what role he can actually earn, because the ceiling, as we've talked about, is really, really high.
For a lot of these guys who have this being billed as a big point guard, and we've seen a ton of them over the years, Steph Castle was the most recent one, obviously, who was an international prospect. But the sweet spot is usually like enough latitude to play with the ball in your hands at times and play make, but not the burden of having to be the primary point guard where everything falls back on you when you're handling defensive pressure. And given the roster construction we've seen at BYU, it seems like that could be what we should expect for Demir. All right, Illinois made a huge push in the international market this spring, brought in two different guys. The first one I want to talk about is Kasparas Jasikunas. Isaac, did I say that right?
Yakishonis, yes.
Yeah, that's it. Close. That was pretty good. That was pretty good for me. Trav, this is another player, 6'5" guard from Lithuania, comes with a significant international reputation. There's some one and done buzz. We'll see if that comes to fruition or not. But what can you tell us about this big guard from Lithuania?
Yeah, just as you said, he's a big guard. He's got some similarities to Marcus Domask, who's an absolute star for the Illini this past season. Just a guy that has great feel for the game, is really skilled, operates well out of ball screens, knows how to take advantage in whatever coverages that the defense throws at him. He can make shots from three, can get to his spots in the lane with the ball in his hands. And kind of has not as much as Marcus Domask, but he is comfortable taking guys down low and taking advantage of mismatches out on the block. So by all means, it sounds like this Illinois staff is extremely excited and has been very, very encouraged in what they've been seeing in the preseason.
All right, Isaac, I know this is in your backyard, so my question is, are we going to see more dribble into the post-up Marcus Domask style, or how's this going to work with Kylan Boswell back there?
Yeah, I mean, I've even seen some film from like the Ayo Dosunmu days where they were doing dribble handoffs to get him to his right hand and get downhill, and you have Kofi Coburn gortatting his defender and opening up the paint for him to go for a layup. Like, I think Illinois can do a lot of those same things with Kasparas Jakishonis. Just his ability to knife into the paint and use angles and use his size to get a paint touch is huge. And I think Illinois really likes his playmaking as maybe his best asset overall. And the buzz this summer has been phenomenal. And you've heard little rumors of like, is he their best player? And that's kind of like, this is a whole new look team, but KJ has an opportunity to be one of the best freshmen in the Big Ten right from the beginning. And you get him a backcourt mate like Kylan Boswell, who I think playing with Caleb Love last year really will help Kylan Boswell learn how to play with Yakushonis, just because he learned to play off the ball. He's a high volume 3-point shooter off the ball and finding ways to impact winning without the ball in his hand. So I think you can see a tag team of Kasparas and Kylan be a really intriguing young backcourt. Now, I think there's going to be turnovers with KJ's game, like regardless, just because he's a little bit of a riverboat gambler at times with some of his reads, but there are also some high-level reads too. So the risk-reward there is going to be really, really interesting. And how much does Brad Underwood put up with it over a course of a long season?
And remember, Illinois has Will Riley coming in as well, who reclassified. He's originally from Canada, but played at the Phelps School in Pennsylvania last year, as well as in the EYBL. So a couple new faces on the perimeter to work in, but also a new face up front. Tomislav Ivisic is a familiar name. Travis, explain to everybody why they have heard that name before and what he might bring to Illinois.
Yeah, in case you don't remember, he is the twin brother of Big Z's Zvonimir Ivisic, who played at Kentucky this past season, but of course followed John Calipari down to Arkansas. But he's very different than Big Z. Big Z is this big 7-footer that has a lot of flash and excitement to his game with his passing, the shot making, and just all the skill. There's so much excitement just around what he could become. Now, Tomislav is very different. You know exactly what you're getting day in and day out. Another 7-footer that is skilled, but he operates well just in setting ball screens, rolling hard to the rim, and scoring in the post. He's just very reliable, has great hands and touch. He's comfortable playing through contact, and then is comfortable stepping out and making shots out to three. Now, that's not a focal point in his game by any means, but don't be surprised if you see him once every 2 games step out and make a shot out to three. Just a plug-and-play system big man that should be should be an early contributor for this Illinois program.
So, Isaac, if we're looking at a big man in Ivisic who has that kind of ability to step to the perimeter, does that mean there's the potential to see him with Morez Johnson? Because, we're talking about these international players, and in each sequence, whether it's Johnson or Will Riley, they've got another high profile recruit coming in from the States too. So finding minutes for all of these guys is presumably going to be somewhat challenging for Brad Underwood. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Ivica is probably closer to a platoon with Mrez Johnson, not necessarily playing them together, but we'll see what that looks like, whether that's 25 minutes and 15 for Ivica and Mrez that way or how it goes. But I think Ivica is shaping up to be maybe the biggest X factor for this Illinois team, just because his ability to stretch the floor and be a threat from three-point range opens up the paint for all of the booty ball stuff that they might want to do with Yakishonis or a Ty Rodgers or a Trey White. Like, they just found something offensively. This was one of the best offensive teams in college basketball last year with that 5-out system, and you need a big man who can make shots. And Ivica, the idea of him making shots is there, but he needs to make them, right? And I think teams are going to be, kind of hesitant early to see if he's actually a real rim or, real floor stretcher, or if he struggles from downtown. So it's going to be a big, gap for him, because the other impacted part about this thing too is he's 21 when the season starts. Like, this is not just some normal freshman who's coming in at 18 or 19. He's 21 already. 7'2", 250 is what he's listed at lately. So he's a big boy, bang down low. So kind of gives Illinois a little bit of a different option, something that they didn't have in this front court.
All right. Now, as I said, all three of these guys are going to be ranked. You can visit 247sports.com by the end of the week to see exactly where they fall, but pretty good expectation. They're all going to be in 4-star status. Guys, I have three more players I want to talk about, but I want to try and get through them a little bit quicker. Isaac, jump in and correct my pronunciations, please. First one at Florida, Urban Kazar, 6'1" point guard from Slovenia. Trav, what can you tell us about him?
Yeah, just a pick and roll scorer that can really make shots out to three, but is also comfortable getting downhill and getting to the rim. Not necessarily a blow by athlete, not the most explosive. So to me, the question marks are going to revolve around how he adapts to the speed, to the athleticism, and the size of the SEC. I mean, the SEC is an absolute monster. There's no denying the skill set and what he can do in an international style system that we've seen out of Todd Golden. But just coming into this league, there are some question marks.
Isaac, anything to add in terms of how he might fit for the Gators?
Well, I mean, they certainly tried to get Kasparas Yakishonis too. So this is a solid pivot after not being able to get KJ. And you just kind of look at what this backcourt is. Like, they need a primary ball handler. And I think Walter Clayton is going to step into that role, being more of that guy. But that's not Will Richard's strengths. That's not necessarily Elijah Martin's strengths. Those are guys who kind of want to play more off the ball. So there's an opening potentially for a guy like Urban Kazar who could come in and potentially play the point. We've seen Walter Clayton shift to an off-ball role, and that Zion pull and roll is definitely up for grabs, and we'll see if Urban can be a factor in that mix.
All right, Villanova is another program that kind of shored up their backcourt depth in the international market. Sasha Gavrilyuk from Bulgaria, 6'2" guard. Trav, what are we to know about this guy, and do we think he's going to be able to crack the rotation in Philly?
Yeah, there's definitely a chance. I mean, this kid is very skilled. He plays with a lot of flash, plays with a ton of confidence. And as you can see, he can make shots out to three, but is at his best out of ball screens. Will make some highlight reel exciting passes out around the perimeter, finding rim rollers and guys spotting up on the perimeter. But the concerns to me revolve around just his size. He's only about 6 foot, 165, 170 pounds. And so translating that over into the Big East is definitely going to be a task. But again, this kid is very skilled, and if he does adapt, they're getting a playmaker and a scorer out on the perimeter for him.
And Isaac, I want to see what you think about this, but when you are kind of trying to adapt to newfound physicality of the American game and you need to put on weight, it's kind of double trouble. And really your only way out of that trouble is to shoot the ball at a high level and create some more space for you there. But this is a team that, with Armstrong leaving, they do need some depth at the point guard position. Does Villanova need this guy to be ready to play?
I think they probably do. I don't expect him to be a starter. I think that's Jameer Brickus, the transfer out of LaSalle. Wooga Poplar out of Miami is going to have a huge role. Obviously, Eric Dixon, getting him back for his 5th year, he's probably the best stretch big in the country. So those three are going to be the top guys. And then it's like kind of open waters for who else wants to pop in, whether that's Tyler Perkins out of Penn or whether that's Sasha being able to carve out a role here too. But I kind of view him as a bench piece and kind of a wait and see what they do in the future. And this is an important piece, though, because Villanova, at the end of the day, like, they didn't get their job done in the transfer portal. Their depth is a real question mark after, in multiple positions. So if they have to, kind of shift to a 3-guard lineup a lot, like I think you could make a case that Sasha might have to be that 3rd or 4th guard in that rotation.
Dang, Isaac came out swinging on that one. He does not making friends in Nova. All right, one more guy to talk about. That's a 7-footer from Turkey headed to SMU. Samet Yigitoglu. Trav, what do we know about Samet?
Yeah, another plug-and-play big man. Runs the floor well for his size. Legit, again, 7-footer. Very good hands. Has touch around the rim. Not necessarily a guy you're going to throw the ball down to down low. He does have some simple right and left hooks. But where he's at his best is just running the floor, screening and rolling hard to the rim where he can finish with just that strength that he already possesses, already looks like a grown man. So physically, he is ready. Again, as we keep coming back to, it's just going to be a matter of can he adapt to the speed and athleticism of the game.
Obviously, Andy Enfield, proud tradition of big men back at USC. Isaac, what are we expecting at SMU, though?
Yeah, well, SMU went big game hunting for bigs in the portal, right? Like Coleman Hawkins was a big late target for them, and they need rebounding in the worst way. Like you kind of look at what this build of this roster is. It's Boopy Miller, it's Chuck Harris in the backcourt, Kario Okendo on the wing. Matt Cross is a really good 4. I really like him. And then at the 5, it's kind of open for a big competition. So Samet is probably going to be in that mix with Johan Traore, a former big-time recruit that went to Auburn, kind of resuscitated his career a little bit out on the West Coast, and now he's back at the high major ranks. Keon Ambrose Hilton, Jarrell Colbert, like a lot of names, but no real true proven high major guy yet. So I think if you're looking at Samet Yigitoglu, he has a chance to potentially be the starting center and put up really big rebounding numbers throughout his career. I think that would be his path to minutes because the 4 guards we talked about are probably going to be the top 4 in usage rate. And you're kind of viewing him as a protect the rim, run the floor, be a play finisher, protect, get rebounds, and that's kind of your role. And if you can do that, you probably can play for SMU this year.
All right, there you have it. Those are 6 international names to know coming to college basketball next year. We're going to thank Isaac for joining us. Make sure you follow him, 247sports.com, as well as on social media, Isaac_Trotter. And again, 247sports.com, wall-to-wall team coverage, recruiting rankings, transfer portal updates, and by the end of the week, we will have updated rankings, including all incoming international prospects in the rising college freshman class. Be sure to visit us there, 247sports.com. And now, going to welcome in Ebos to join Travis, and we are going to talk some recruiting. Now, fellas, before we get going here, let me start with this. We've seen a lot of list cuts in the last week or so. But it's not 4 or 5 schools. Guys are cutting their list to 10. They're cutting their list to 12. Sometimes it's 8. Let me just say this. If you think you are going to be able to choose from 10 or 12 schools, it ain't happening. I can appreciate the fact that maybe you want to include some people on the school, just hey, thanks for recruiting me, but everybody knows it's really not going to work out. There is no way in the way recruiting works, because if you play, let's say you're a wing, if they're recruiting you, they're recruiting a bunch of other wings too. So some of these lists are just wild, quite frankly. The 10 to 12.
I want to add one point to this real quick before we move on. In the day of NIL, it is absolutely to the player's advantage, whether it's by design, by the player, their people around them, or specifically their agents. It plays into their hands to leverage this and put on as many schools as possible, garner as many offers as possible, especially from the blue bloods, and keep people believing that there is more than just 2 or 3 schools involved. And I believe that is a reason why that this is, and I'm going to let Bossy confirm because he's, again, the OG. This has been the slowest recruiting cycle I have ever seen in my 5 years of being here.
Yeah, Travis beat me to it a little bit. It's definitely been kind of slow. I don't feel like we came out of the summer with as much clarity as we've had in the past on who's really leaning one way or another. But to Travis's point with the NIL here, there's a thought out there that high school kids don't really get paid in the portal, and they don't, at least not in comparison to what transfers are getting right now. So in order to maximize potential NIL earnings, what we're seeing from a lot of these guys is big, long lists so that they can theoretically pit as many schools against each other as they can. We see a lot of guys talking about taking 8 to 10, possibly even more official visits. We're in the age of the professional visit taker. And amongst all this, so it's kind of a new territory for all of us to go through. But as Travis said, can't really blame the kids or their advisors, their agents for doing this, because the reason you hire an agent is to get yourself the most NIL opportunities. And one way to do this is to get schools fighting over your services, thinking that they have a real chance here.
The key, listen, that's all great context. It's a phenomenal point. Well done. But the thing is this, like, some of these kids, I think, actually believe they're going to go on 8 visits. And then when the visits are done, they're going to have their choice of those 8 schools. That is not happening. Some of those schools, pick your number, a good percentage of those schools will have gotten commitments from other players by that point. No school is going to have you on campus and say, great, we hope you pick us in 2 months. They're going to press up on you and try and get that commitment. They're going to tell you, if you don't say yes, somebody else is going to, and we don't know how long we can hold them off. So while like leveraging those schools for the bigger NIL paydays is certainly a theme here, so too is being realistic, even if it's behind closed doors, and understanding what it's going to take and how the process is really going to shake out. Because while kids are looking for schools, the schools are looking for the prospects too. And either one of them can back out of that recruitment at any point in time. With all that having been said, I want to go through some of these bigger lists, shall we say. There's been a ton of kids who've cut their lists recently, but there's a handful of guys who have got pretty significant lists in terms of the number of school on them. So I want to start with Malik Thomas. Now, Malik Thomas, a 5-star prospects in the class. He's got UConn, Kansas, Alabama, Pitt, Auburn, Kansas State, and Arkansas. So it's a big list, but it's not totally as obnoxious as some of these other 12 school lists. One of the most best scoring guards in the EYBL this year, the ultimate tough shot maker. You see the deep floater there. He's very well known for the step backs and his ability to shoot off the dribble on cue with that pull up. But Trav, out of those 7 or so schools here, can we distill this down to say, okay, who are the ones that have the best chance right now?
Yeah, we only have one 5-star commitment right now, and that is Darius Acuff. We're about to have more come down the pipe. And again, as Boss was saying, there's not much clarity out there right now, but we are actually starting to get some clarity in the direction of Malik Thomas's recruitment. And as of right now, the UConn Huskies have made him a top priority throughout every single game that he plays. And by all accounts, it sounds like they are really becoming the heavy favorite in this recruitment. Not saying that a commitment is imminent right now, but as of today, the UConn Huskies are the leader, and it's going to take some major shakeups to change that.
All right. Bossy, anything to add on that, or do you want to move on here?
I think you need to always watch Arkansas with a guard, John Caliparian guards. You can never sleep on them. Heard some good rumblings there. And, Alabama's also built up a ton of positive buzz with things. But, it does seem to be that if UConn really, really wants to push up on Malik and get him done, and he decide that he's their guy, that they may be tough to beat on this one.
Yeah, I think that's well said when you think about some of the other guards on their board as well. As I said, it's a two-way street before you get the commitment. Boss, I want to ask you about another top guard in the class, top 20 prospect, Trey McKenna. He's got 10 schools on his list. This long-armed, big-bodied scorer played next to Darius Acuff. He's down to Ohio State, Notre Dame, Miami, Creighton, Oregon, UCLA, Georgetown, Michigan State, Michigan, and USC. So again, I find it hard to believe that all of those schools are actually in contention, but it's obvious why they would all want him. What are we thinking about, like, the favorites in this process right now?
Yeah, we talked about the professional visit takers, right? McKinney has been a big-time visit taker and is going to take a lot more. But I think, looking at this list, there's 3 schools that I would probably zero in on. That's Georgetown, Michigan State, and USC. There's certainly room for others, and, you never want to discount Michigan either. But I think that those 3 are the ones that we're really locking in on. Georgetown has been a school we've heard about with Trey McKenna for a long time, and they've got a lot going in their favor with him. So, if there were a thought to be leader right now, Georgetown would maybe be the perceived leader as we enter this. But obviously Michigan State has done well with guards from inside the state. You can never rule out Tom Izzo. And then, Musselman has some pop, and he's been landing some McDonald's All-American guys from Arkansas, or while he's at Arkansas now, presumably trying to do the same thing at USC. But I think those are the 3 that stand out to me: Georgetown, Michigan State, and USC.
Trav, anything to add?
No, nailed it.
All right. Let me ask you this then, Trav. We're going to go to Tunde Yusufu. Again, monster list, a power wing, total mismatch problem. He's ultra powerful. He's a high volume scorer, and he too has a very significant list with Baylor, UConn, Kentucky, Arizona, USC, Kansas, Tennessee, Washington State, Arizona State, pardon me, and UCLA. So, Trav, tell me which of those are real, please.
Man, this is actually a tough one because it seems like this one's pretty open. I imagine most of these schools are going to be getting a very fair shot for Tunde Yusufu, starting with Baylor, Kansas, Kentucky, Tennessee, UConn, and USC. I think are all going to be getting a chance, but I do think Arizona, UCLA, and some of those other schools on there, Washington, all have some ground to make up to become a serious contender. UCLA has been keeping an eye on him for some time. And so, again, Tunde Yusufu, he just hasn't been a top priority for the Bruins as of yet. So where this could head with these visits, he's expected to take several visits on this list. So there's going to be a lot to shake out here in the coming months.
You know, guys, that's the other thing too. Sometimes we see these lists and we know because we've been on the road all summer, and it's like, wait a minute, that guy's not recruiting you. You know what I mean? That coach is not at your games, and that's not specific to any one player. I think we've seen that quite a bit, actually. All right, boss, I want to ask you about one of the biggest stock risers from the summer, a guy who came into the summer already having some visits scheduled, and that's Matthew Abel. He's just really blown up. We've all written about him at this point. But again, he had an initial list, and then he just went nuts in the first week at the Adidas 3SSB Championship in Rock Hill. He shot a ridiculous percentage from the three-point line. He showed dexterity, as you see that left-handed finish. He's got a really projectable frame. And now his list has evolved a little bit. So now he, too, has a very significant group of schools that he is considering. What are we deeming the latest as you look at his final eight?
So I think Northwestern, when you look at this list, was the first of these schools to really step up and make him a massive priority. He's going to be taking his first visit there later on this week, I guess, beginning August 1st. So he should be leaving for campus any day now. And they were a heavy presence at all of his games. And this is a kid for whom academics are legitimately going to matter and all this stuff. Now, Boston College, his father played there. He's got a visit set up with BC as well. So you got to never discount that. But Baylor and Michigan are two of the newcomers that kind of jump out as schools that we've heard generating a lot of positive buzz with him in the background. Not a surprise with Abel being from Florida that Michigan staff, led by Dusty May, would have made some inroads there. And then just Baylor with what they've done at the shooting guard position the last couple of years with Keontae George and those guys moving on, they become very, very attractive. So Michigan and Baylor would be the two newcomers I would keep an eye on, along with Northwestern and Boston College kind of having already been there already.
You know what stands out to me about that list, kind of the haves and have-nots in terms of just buying power. If NIL becomes a factor there, there's clearly going to be some different level of resources among the 8 schools on that list. Trav, a guy you've talked about quite a lot is CJ Ingram. He is now committed to basketball, and his recruitment has taken a jump because of it. Just a powerful downhill wing, one of the better attackers in the EYBL this season. What do we know about his recruitment? Because if I'm not mistaken, he too has cut his list to 10. So I'm going to ask you the same question. Which of those 10 is actually has a realistic chance of landing this talent?
Yeah, this is coming down to 3 schools, but the leader here is Florida. His dad played there. He's from there, has already been on campus for an official visit. I think it is going to take some serious effort and some major work just to get him to flip. Now, the 2 schools I am looking at is Georgia with their inroads that they have in the state of Florida after Mike White was the head coach in Gainesville. That staff has made him a priority for the last 2 months and have already made up some ground. And then the next one I'm looking at is the Kansas Jayhawks. You can never discount the blue blood, especially when they have had a track record of success with wings like CJ Ingram. So anytime they get involved, you always hold your breath until that finish line and you finally hear that ultimate announcement.
Yeah, no doubt about that. All right, Bossy, I've got one more for you, and that is Christian Jeffrey from New Heights Lightning, a New York native who played his prep school basketball down in Maryland this year. He's down to Maryland, Oklahoma State, Mississippi State, Michigan, Butler, Penn State, Texas A&M, and Tennessee. But am I to understand it that there is a presumed favorite emerging here?
Yeah, I think so. I think you got to look at Maryland on this one. He's no stranger to campus. They took his high school teammate Malachi Palmer in the 2024 recruiting class, and they've really put an emphasis on getting him in there and onto campus. So as we head into this with this down or whittled down a little bit, I think Maryland begins this process as the favorite. Butler is kind of sneaky in there from what I've heard, but if it comes down to it, I really think it might be tough to beat Kevin Willard on this one.
All right, guys. Now, one other player I want to ask you about, because as I mentioned, there's a number of players who've had list cuts that have been more reasonable in terms of the total number of schools. And we didn't talk about them here today because if it's a list of 3 or 4 or 5, maybe even 6 schools, you assume that most of them are legitimate contenders. But the one exception to that is I want to talk about Cayenne Anthony. Obviously, there's a lot of interest in him because he's Carmelo Anthony's son, number one, but also number two, because he is a potent scorer in his own right. He has got a list now of Auburn, Syracuse, Florida State, Ohio State, USC, and Rutgers. So Bossy, I'm going to start with you on this one. What is are we thinking all 6 of these schools have a legit chance, or is there a perceived favorite in the Cayenne sweepstakes at this point?
The favorite has to be Syracuse, right? Big believer in that kids don't go play for schools where their dad doesn't coach, or they don't go play for schools where their father was a legend. I don't believe they do it until they actually do, and it very rarely happens. With Cayenne, we're talking about a dude whose dad is a legend. Obviously, Carmelo won a national championship there. His name is on the building that they practice in. Can't see that guy passing that up to go to Rutgers. That just doesn't make any sense, not to mention all the shoe ties with Rutgers being an Adidas program and Carmelo being a Jordan brand athlete. It's maybe something crazy happens here, but I think him ending up anywhere other than Syracuse for school would be one of the bigger surprises we've ever seen in recruiting.
All right, Trav. Bossy says he's not going to Rutgers. Any chance he goes to, I don't know, Auburn? Going to go wear Under Armour? What do you think?
I'm following Bossy's lead on this one. I would be absolutely shocked to see him not end up in the Syracuse orange uniform.
All right, guys. Well, there you have it. We took everybody with a list of 8 or more, tried to distill it down to what the real lists may be. Of course, you can find lots more on 247sports.com. You're also going to be able to watch this show every Tuesday. That will be back in 1 week's time, 5 p.m. Eastern time, 4 p.m. Central time, the 247 Sports College Basketball Show. We've got no off season when it comes to this show. We're continuing to talk college basketball and recruiting all year long. So we will see you again next week.